Now, I'll be honest with you, lads, I wasn't actually going to make this video. By now, if you've read the title, you'll see that I'm going to be comparing how realistic iRacing is to real life. And I know what you're thinking, how many other people have made this video already? And that's exactly what I was thinking, hence why I wasn't going to make this video. But then I realised something. I actually reckon that I am the most qualified person on planet Earth to make this video. Right, I'm now attaching you to a tripod. Ready for a spin? Whee! It's definitely kind of the best way of doing it. And let me explain to you why. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Tom Nippers and I am a Formula Ford driver in real life. Now, of course, on iRacing, we have the FF1600 car, which is pretty much exactly what I drive. The only difference being that I drive a Van Diemen and the car on the game is a Ray. To put it into F1 terms, it's like that I drive a Red Bull and on the game it's a Ferrari. It's in the same category, it's still a Formula Ford. However, a little over a year ago now, I actually drove the exact Ray Formula Ford that is on iRacing. And when I say exact, I mean the actual one. I actually drove the car that iRacing used to measure up the Ray to put onto their game. So yeah, there physically couldn't be anyone more qualified to talk about this than me. So today I'm going to be revisiting Donington Park, which is where I drove the car for real, and I will be given a back-to-back comparison of both in real life and on iRacing. And at the end of this video, I will be given a verdict to the all-important question, just how realistic is iRacing? Okay, so we are now sat in the car at Donington Park. This is exactly the same track, the same layout of the track that I was driving when I drove the car in real life. The only difference being I have put the ugliest livery known to mankind on this car. It actually looks like a f***ing turd. So I do apologise for that. I will say this quickly. I have done quite a bit of iRacing recently. I've actually taken it seriously recently because I've noticed how much it's helping in real life. So it gives you a little bit of an indication of how good I think it is. Yeah, I've got like a 2.7k rating, but obviously I have literally had to build my account up from scratch. Actually, it was worse than scratch because my dad had been playing on it before. And yeah, it wasn't pretty. It was, yeah, I think my rating was like 200, so I didn't even know it's possible. But when I actually practice a track and I do it for a couple of days, I'm usually right at the front of the tops off. So I am quite good at iRacing, but I'm not the best in the world either. But in real life, I obviously am. Basically, all I'm going to try and do is put a lap in, and then what we'll do is we'll go for the footage from the real life car, and then we'll compare the two and see the similarities and see what's different and what's similar. But yeah, right, let's get it underway. Doing a great job here, Tom. Right, let's go out for the first time then. Is one thing with the sim is how when the tyres are cold, it is unbelievably difficult to drive on here. And in real life, it is hard, but it's not like it's not the same. It's not, you're not on ice. You know, you've got some grip. Incredibly similar braking points there to what you'd use in real life. What we're gonna try and do, we'll try and set a lap time so then we can compare the lap from real life to the sim. It's still a bit too hot into there. So similar to how it is in real life. Right, so let's do a lap then. Let's talk our way through our lap. So as we go into the first corner here, right as this pit line changes to a dotted line, it's usually where you brake in real life. And that feels roughly right on the sim. I would say probably I could have broke a little bit later and harder there. As we go for the crane of curves, very similar obviously. Not a very difficult section though, to be fair. And then hard on the brakes into the old hairpin. Yeah, that's very, very similar to real life. Fuck to the track limits warning. That's a bit of a nothing corner. It's just flat out. As we go into McLean's, down one gear. Really difficult to get the car in there usually, but that wasn't too bad. And then don't go down a gear here, but I feel like you probably would on the sim. Actually saying that feels very good. And then a decent run for the final chicane. That is a really, really solid lap for only a few laps in. I think we've got a lot more time in the bag here, though. We're going to be in the low 13s, aren't we, in no time. The curb is much bigger there in real life, actually. This corner's blind, and it is terrifying. Oh, there you go. That's what could happen in real life. You can't get back on the track, because the second you're off, you're turning away. You're turning back onto the track, and the fucking grass is just taking you away. Fucking hell, those are some shit excuses. Anyway, I've essentially gone non-verbal for this next lap because I've decided to lock the fuck in and put a decent one in. So while I've actually gone quiet for a change, I thought it might be nice to give a few thoughts on how I actually think the car and track is in general compared to real life. One thing I will say about iRacing is that they only seem to actually focus on the things that are actually important. I think what iRacing understand better than any other racing game is that no one actually gives a shit how the trees move. And if you're actually talking about the car compared to real life, I honestly can't, like, things like the steering wheel, the logo in the middle of the steering wheel, the shape of the mirrors, the bolts that are connecting the bodywork together, all of it is like absolutely identical to how it is on the actual car. And we'll talk more about the handling later when I've actually compared it to the real life thing. But in terms of like that in-car feeling, how similar it actually feels to be in the car on the game to being in the car in real life, it is unbelievably similar. So yeah, good job for that iRacing, but I start moaning again now, so. That's not off. I'm counting it. I don't give a fuck. That's fine. I had 2 wheels on the track. Whatever this time is, I'm counting it. Go Crichton, man. Okay. So what time's that going to be then? It's going to be a 1:13.451. Let's see how that fares to real life, shall we? Right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the actual footage from my test day here about a year ago now in the Ammonite car, and I'm going to go through it and talk my way around it. Just go a bit closer, why not? What about that? It's a lot of work, YouTube stuff, isn't it? If you thought that was a lot of work, mate, wait till you get to editing it. While I've got you though, subscribe. Okay, so in front of me now, I have got the footage from my day at Donington Park, which is where we are currently sat on an entry curb. I'm going to go through my footage, talk my way through it, talk about what I was feeling on the day, how it was, how the car was handling, and what was kind of different to other cars I've driven before. Actually, first of all, let me tell you about how this day came about, like why it actually happened. So basically, at the start of last year, we went to round 1 of the National Championship at Silverstone, and essentially we didn't make it for round 1. Our car wasn't ready. Yeah, so we essentially decided we weren't going to do the National Championship that year because we knew we weren't going to be out till sort of June, July at the earliest. But anyway, we went to round 1 at Silverstone and like to watch, and essentially all the top boys, literally all of them, didn't finish. So it basically meant that everyone we'd be competing for the championship with had no points either. So it basically made no difference if we went or not. So for round 2, we decided to go with Ammonite, who is the team that you literally will know from iRacing. Don't get me wrong, slightly out of the price budget, but we basically thought we'll do a couple of races with Ammonite, and if obviously we got a deal or anything, we'd probably consider carrying on. And yeah, we gave Andy a call from Ammonite, who is the boss of Ammonite, and basically said, look, can we drive for you at the next race if that's possible? He was well on board, and we kind of thought, you know, if we enter the championship at round 2, we might have a chance of winning it. Now, unfortunately, there's no other way of putting this. That weekend was fucking shit. Through no fault of anyone's, the car just didn't work. It literally failed in pretty much every way. And we had no power. Literally, like, the engine wouldn't work. We actually ended up pitting in the first race, and in the second race, in an attempt to fix it, we made things, it ran, but it was shit. And that's not a hit on Ammonite, by the way. They were actually an amazing team. It was just a really stupidly unlucky day where a lot of things were going wrong. And actually, they wanted to change the engine, and we said no, which in hindsight was a stupid idea because we thought it was an electrical fault that was causing the power issue. And it was, but if we changed the engine like Andy wanted to, it would have fixed the electrical issue that was wrong, you know? But we knew that was Andy's best engine, so we didn't want to change from it. And to be honest with you, we should have listened to Andy and Ammonite because they probably had more of an idea of that car than we did. But they are a mega team. They've won so much, it's insane. So Andy, the team boss of Ammonite, decided to give us a free test at Brands Hatch at Donington Park, which is obviously where the race was the week before. And he basically gave us the free test to actually see what the car was capable of and what I could do in it. And that brings us to this footage right here, which was my last session of the day in the Ammonite car, in the actual FF1600 car that they used to measure up the car for iRacing. So yeah, let's enough waffle, let's actually watch the footage. I've got to say, I do like the team. Ammonite are a great team, but f***ing hell, the camera placement, I've seen better, lads. Okay, so going through the final chicane, which is actually where I'm currently sat, we come on to start our first flying lap of the final session of the day. I remember at this point I was kind of used to the car, and I was feeling really confident. Ooh, a bit messy through turn 1. Look at that, okay, now it's a bit of a power slide. I think this is fresh out the pits though, so I am warming tyres up, to be fair. Look at it again, just switchy as using all the track limits to them. Same, you can just hear the tyres squealing, just not smooth at all. I'll skip to a little bit later in the session because at the moment we're just tyre squealing. Okay, so coming on to like an actual hot lap now where the tyres have got temperature and yeah, actually a good comparison. I do remember the power being so much better than anything I'd ever driven. Yeah, usually I was used to some pretty shocking engines. Yeah, that's more like it. I do remember this car being like, the Ammonite car, like the FF1600 Ray specifically, being incredibly like pointy on the brake, meaning like when you had your foot on the brake, the car's front end grip was insane. It had so much. But I will say, I did think that the Ray in general that was its only weakness, is that like there was only one way of driving that car properly, and that was on the brake. Like into corners, you needed to be on that brake to get it to turn. If you were like a little bit, you know, if you broke a bit early or whatever, and you didn't have the same level of brake pressure, it was quite difficult to get the car in. And Formula Fords are like inherently understeery anyway. So it is funny because like if you drive a Ray properly, it's as good as any Formula Ford car you can possibly get. Look at that. Oh, well, that is a bit slidey. Okay, so I've paused because this next lap is the final lap I did of the entire day. Remember that. It was the last lap I did all day. Okay? Not so great coming onto the lap, but forget that. And as we go out on the start-finish straight, this starting the final lap of the day, lay on the brakes into turn one and got the car in on the brake. As I said, that is perfect. That was the best I did turn one all day. Through the crane of curves. This section is dead easy, to be fair, it's just flat out. And then into the old hairpin. This is probably the most difficult corner on the track. Nailed it, absolutely nailed it. Used a bit too much road, but in terms of corner entry and everything, was absolutely spot on. Into McLean's. Oh, it's good, it's good. Oh, that corner is terrifying. The name's gone off the top of my head, but it's completely blind. And by the way, it's actually completely blind on iRacing too, which is a great, like, obviously it's like a silly detail, but even things like you don't consider, like the level change, the fact that you can't see it because obviously you go up and then you turn into a blind corner. iRacing have that sort of stuff down to a T, which is like, it sounds silly and like easy, but that, I can't imagine that being a very easy thing to actually program and get right. And then going down the final straight, into the final corner, nailed it on the entry. Oh, lovely flick through the last corner. This right here is probably one of the best moments I've had in a race car. I got a 14.6. I got a 1 minute 14.6. You can see I actually fucking celebrate. I was celebrating the last lap of a test day. And I'll tell you why that was. Because the pole time around the same circuit that I obviously had a race at the week before was a 1 minute 14.6. And I did it on old tyres on a test day the week after. It was at that moment, bear in mind, up to that point, I'd had no proof that I was any good. And I had never proven to anyone else I was any good because I never had the car to do it. And at that moment there, I realised I was quick enough and I just didn't quite have the kit yet. But anyway, enough about my life story. Let's talk about how realistic iRacing actually is. So first of all, right, let's have a look at the differences. So obviously you've got the easy ones, like obviously you've got no G-force on the sim, but obviously like you can't, that's not iRacing's fault, it's physically impossible. Unless you've got one of those big off F1 simulators that cost about 200 grand. So of course you're missing that like realistic, you know, physical feeling of it, where it's like, you know, the car's throwing you around a bit and you're tucked in the seat belts, but that's never going to be possible. And if it is, it's going to be millions. So that certainly isn't a flaw of iRacing, to say the least. Another key difference is the fact that obviously in the real car we've got a shifter and it's a 4-speed box. You've got 4 gears, and obviously on the sim I'd say 95% of people are using paddles. I mean, I'm guilty as charged. I use the paddles because it's quicker. I even have a shifter and I use the paddles on the sim because it's quicker for lap time, and of course if I'm going to try and compete on iRacing, then I obviously want to be giving myself the best chance. But the main difference that I would say stops it from being classified as realistic is of course just the speed factor and the fear factor, to be honest with you. There's no fear on the sim. You know, if you crash on the sim, the worst you're going to do is maybe hurt your wrist a bit as the wheel moves. But in real life, if you get it wrong, you can obviously seriously hurt yourself, and there's just that fear of like, you don't want to smash the car to bits. And not that you want to do it on the sim either, but you really don't want to smash the car to bits in real life. Like for me, I've always had a factor of like, I know if I crash the car, the chances are I'm not racing for another couple of months at least, because obviously, you know, we ain't made a moolah. That cannot be replicated, nor can it ever be replicated on the sim, because you can just never quite have that same level of fear. No matter how good a sim is, it will never be possible. So that's, again, not iRacing's fault. It's just a difference that I think is worth mentioning. But now, more positively, going on to the similarities, and to be honest with you, the list is endless. First of all, the one thing I will say that iRacing is absolutely insanely good at is learning circuits. I arrived at Donington, having never been here before, having practiced on the sim prior to arriving, and it genuinely felt like I'd been here
for as long as I'd ever wanted to be. It literally feels like when you practice a track on iRacing and then go to the track, it actually feels like you've been there before. And that's from little things like where the pit lane exits, you know, where, oh, fuck off, another plane. Yeah, it's one about, like, you know, being to the track. So it's literally like things like braking points, turning entries and all that sort of stuff. It's all so incredibly similar on iRacing to real life, I cannot tell you. It's not like, it doesn't feel like you're driving two different cars. It feels like you're driving, it is just a perfect replica of the car on iRacing. But the thing that I'm most like impressed about with the FF1600 car on iRacing, and specifically the Ray car, the Ray model of Formula Ford car that is on iRacing, is the characteristics of the car are identical. And I mean, they're as close to identical as they possibly could be. On iRacing, you can't turn that car very well unless you're on the brake, which is exactly, as we've seen there, what it is like driving the real thing. It's also very twitchy through high speed corners, which again is exactly like the Ray is in real life. And that's not a negative, by the way. That can, you know, twitchiness doesn't always mean slow. It's a great car, and it is just it's just a bit twitchy through high speed stuff, but obviously if you're able to control it, you're fine. They look identical as well, which I know is like a very little thing in terms of actually driving it and practicing for real life, but they do look identical. But to sum it up quickly, do I think iRacing is realistic? I'd say yes and no. I've just said I'm going to sum it up quickly, and now I'm going to give you a big explanation as to why I've said that. So I'm just completely lying. So the reason I say no, first of all, is that I don't think if you're sat in your bedroom on the sim, it ever feels real. Like, it never feels, you know, it can't physically feel like you're at a racetrack, you know, the atmosphere and all sorts of stuff. It doesn't feel realistic in that sense. Although I will say, actually, I'm lying a little bit in terms of actually racing other cars on iRacing. That feeling is the same in the car or on the sim. Like, it is, I've raced since I was fucking 10 years old, and I still get nervous as f if I'm leading a race on iRacing. Like, it's just that, like, in a good way, like that, like that adrenaline of leading a race or going for an overtake. That's all very similar from the sim to real life. And actually, when I think about it, I've only ever got that feeling on iRacing, so it probably is something subconsciously to do with the fact that it feels so real. But going back to my original point, it can never feel totally real. It'll never quite be exactly the same. You know, you're never going to have the wind brushing against your face. You're never going to have, you know, the fear of actually hurting yourself. You know, that sort of stuff, which is obviously like, that's a big part of racing. You can never have that. But is iRacing a good enough tool to actually be practicing for the real thing? Yeah, like, without a doubt. I use it on a week-to-week basis. If I'm going to a circuit, if I, like, for example, I've come to Donington now this weekend for a race, and I have been playing on iRacing at Donington Park, just driving around with AIs in preparation for this race, and I'm like, yeah, like, I feel like I've arrived here and I feel sharp. And I'd actually go as far to say, I find doing a week on iRacing, you know, not like constantly, but going on every evening, for example, for a couple of hours, I genuinely say that is more useful than doing a first test session. You do the first test session usually, and obviously without a simulator, you'd be arriving, you're literally like, you're going out, you've like, oh, okay, I've got to remember the track, I've got to remember how the car feels, I've got to remember all these things that you've got to get yourself prepared for the day. And I think doing a couple of nights within a week on the build up to a race before going to a circuit, you've done that before you even got there. And then you can go out. I literally came out first session this morning, and my second lap was one of the fastest laps of the day. So I felt like I'd been here all week. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to make this video for, because I'm from a unique perspective where I've driven on iRacing a lot, and I've driven the real thing as well. And obviously I've only drove that Ray car a couple of times. But obviously that is the exact car that obviously iRacing used to measure it up. I use iRacing to help me like you can't believe. I use iRacing constantly. Whenever there's a track that is on iRacing and I'm going there the following week, I'm on it all the time, and I consistently use it as a base practice tool before I get to the circuit, and I consistently arrive to those circuits that I'm able to practice on before arriving to sharp straight away. Every time. So is iRacing realistic? I'd say yeah. If I was to give an overall yes or no, yes, it is. And is it a good enough tool to be practicing for real life? I can only speak for myself, but in terms of on the Formula Ford car that I've driven, and I'd imagine it's probably the same for all cars on iRacing, without a doubt, it's probably the best practice tool I've ever used. And one quick thing I will add at the end, just to say, is I have got really nice pedals, a really good wheel, and of course I've got all the stuff to make it realistic as well as iRacing. But you can have all that sort of stuff, and if you're playing a game, it doesn't make a difference. The game itself is incredible. Let's pack this up. So yeah, I hope that answers that question finally. I probably should have made this video ages ago. Obviously this is one of my first ever YouTube videos. I've been doing a bit of the short form stuff for a while now, but trying to get into the YouTube now because there's more money in it.